Hi guys, Max here, and today I thought we'd just do a little bit update into where we are in the world regarding a couple of things. Firstly, the Ukraine war, and then secondly, just a touch of politics, looking at how it's going to influence the markets. Basically, how we're doing this week and what we should expect to hear about and pay attention to over the next week and the weeks after that. So we're going to start off, as I said, with the war in Ukraine, which we haven't really looked at on this channel for about 2 months now. We did a few updates when the war was, just evolving, when lots of things were changing, back when actually a lot was happening every day. And nowadays, actually, it's slowed down an awful lot. There isn't a lot of movement anymore. Of course, Russia had that big push towards Kyiv and making their way westwards towards Odessa and Mykolaiv as well. But then everything slowed down. The Russians routed from the north part of the country of Ukraine, and now all the fighting is really in the east around Luhansk and Donetsk. So what is the update on the place? Well, it's still very static. There was a big Russian offensive in an area called Severodonetsk, and Russians took a large part of the city. And then over the last couple of days, actually, we've seen the Ukrainians counterattack and retake that city. So again, there hasn't really been any major change. That was the first major Russian success that we saw in a few weeks. And so the fact that they lost that area and the Ukrainians took it back, but also the fact that the Ukrainians aren't really having much luck in pushing Russia out of the rest of the areas of Ukraine that they've taken. Well, really, it looks like the Ukrainian war is settling down into a bit of a stalemate. It doesn't really seem like there's much chance at all for a decisive end, for a decisive victory on either side of the war. Both sides have lost tens of thousands of soldiers, thousands of pieces of equipment, thousands of vehicles as well. Really, it doesn't seem like there's going to be any fast movements anymore, any stunning feints like the Russian supporters like to say there are, or anything like that. We're probably going to see a long, slow, drawn-out conflict that is likely to continue for months until we reach probably a negotiated settlement at some point. Now, as a result of this, as a result of the war slowing down but still staying very, very violent, well, the reality is that actually tensions between East and West, between Russia and the rest of the West, the EU, the UK, the US and things like that, well, they're not getting any better, and they're probably not going to get any better either. Over the last couple of days and the last week or so, we've seen Putin come out with once again another threat, this time saying that any Western weapons which are used to strike Russia, that will be seen as a declaration of war from the West towards Russia. Of course, we saw similar sort of threats made months ago, saying that if any Western weapons are used to kill Russians at all, that would be a declaration of war. If javelins or NLAWs are used to kill Russian tanks, that would be a declaration of war. And so far, all of those threats have really been very toothless, and it seems like this one is as well. As a result of this, the UK, the United Kingdom, has just announced that they will be, for the first time, sending long-range missile systems over to Ukraine, and these will be expected, well, most people are expecting them to be used to strike deep into Russia itself, again, going directly against this threat made by Putin. As a result of Putin hearing about this, he instantly wound back on his threats. And he basically said that, well, Ukraine already has missiles that have this sort of range and they've had them for the entirety of the war, so it doesn't change anything. So he's already aware that actually his threats aren't really working anymore. They're not having that desired effect anymore. People just aren't really afraid of the reaction that Russia might make at this point. Now, despite that, some things are still seriously deteriorating this time and over the last week, particularly with Russia's decision to strike the port of Odessa, an area where millions and millions of tons of wheat and foodstuffs is exported from Ukraine to the rest of the world every year. And that's the big focus that we saw of Ukraine and that conflict over the last week or so. It's how Russia is deciding to attack trade with the West. They're going to target the funding of Ukraine's government. They're going to target the rest of the world's food supply as an attempt to try and put pressure on everyone else to get them to stop supporting this conflict. As a result of this, we should expect foodstuffs in the commodity market to go up in price. Things like wheat, for obvious reasons. If wheat isn't being exported, then the supply for that wheat is reduced, so price will increase. But also for competing foodstuffs as well, things like soybean futures, they will probably rise on this news as well, even if they aren't directly impacted or the supply of those commodities isn't directly impacted by this change in this conflict. Well, the demand for them will be, because food has to be replaced by something else, and so other food commodities will see prices increase. Now, this is obviously not a good thing for a world that is embroiled with massive inflation, which is dominating almost every news cycle in almost every country. And of course, the other big side of inflation regarding the Ukrainian conflict is energy prices, natural gas prices, and oil prices in particular. And then, as a result of them, electricity prices, and things aren't getting much better there either, because, as I said earlier, this war is slowing down, but it's still staying very, very violent. Well, we shouldn't expect an end to these energy price spikes anytime soon either. Now, there are a few certain efforts being made to reduce energy prices right now, but frankly, I don't think any of them are going to be too significant and have any major effects on the prices we're seeing. The first is that OPEC countries, which is a cartel of oil producing and exporting countries, well, they're going to be increasing the supply of oil. They're going to be drilling more and processing more and exporting more, but they're not doing it by too much, very specifically, because if they did, say, double the supply of oil overnight, well, then the price of oil would drop drastically, and these countries would find themselves far less profitable. So they're striking a balancing act between maintaining high oil prices and exporting lots of oil to get as much revenue as possible. Another thing that's being done, but again isn't really going to have a major change on anything, is small independent policies made by individual governments. The most recent one I've seen is Biden announcing that he's removing tariffs on importing solar panels from 4 separate countries. The idea here is that it will just increase the supply of solar in the US, and so people or businesses or investors will be able to buy solar, set it up, increase the supply of electricity, and help to drop prices. Anyway, as a result of this, yes, energy prices will fall very, very slightly, but this is going to be a long-term change. It's not going to have an immediate effect. And to be honest, solar already makes up such a small amount of electricity generation in the US, it's not going to have much of an effect in the long run either. Basically, what I'm saying is that these things being put into place, these plans, they aren't going to be enough. And so you shouldn't get your hopes up that they're going to solve the energy crisis. The reality is that inflation is just ridiculously high everywhere you look. Even countries that actually haven't gone overboard printing money and didn't lose complete fiscal responsibility and monetary responsibility over the COVID pandemic, countries like Switzerland, well, they're now starting to see higher inflation as well, because every economy that they involve themselves with, that they work with and trade with, is also seeing that high inflation. The only real way to reduce inflation at this point is through demand destruction, or simply put, a recession. We need people to stop spending money. We need people to be poorer. It sounds absolutely awful to say that, but inflation is sky high because there is multiple people, multiple individuals or entities competing for the same limited amount of products. If you remove that demand, prices will fall, and that's really the only shot we have at reducing inflation at this point. Now, finally, just a touch on British politics. You may have seen this morning that some news came out that Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister here in the UK, our leader of our government, well, he's facing a vote of no confidence, which could mean he's about to be ousted from his job. Now, we're not 100% sure how it's going to evolve at this point, but we will probably know how it's gone by tomorrow's video, so I'll likely give you all an update then. Now, there are lots of reasons for this, but in general, this is just because his government, the people behind him, not the opposition party, well, they're unhappy with him. They're unhappy with his behaviour and with the way he's running the government. Most of this stems from a repeated breach of lockdown rules that happened mostly over 2020 and 2021 as well. There has just been scandal after scandal after scandal in the UK from politicians, from media personalities as well. Basically, anyone with even the slightest amount of authority over COVID, they were all telling everyone else to stay locked down while completely ignoring the rules themselves. Everyone's a little bit fed up, no one's happy with anyone, and so it's finally reached this tipping point where finally the MPs that make up this Conservative government, well, a certain amount of them have written in a letter calling for a vote of no confidence, basically saying they don't have confidence in their leader, in his ability to run the country, and so it's now triggered a vote of the rest of Conservative Party members of Parliament, and if a majority of them vote to get rid of Johnson, well, then he will be gone and we'll be looking at a new Prime Minister. Now, this being a finance channel, I thought I'd just quickly discuss how it might impact markets, and the simple fact is it might have a small impact on British markets in particular in the short term, but in the long term, this really isn't likely to be anything major. This Conservative government isn't conservative at all. They don't abide by the typical conservative ideas of low taxation and business freedom and things like that. They pretty much just pander to as many people as they can. So they have shifted leftwards over recent years to trying to draw a larger voter base. As a result of that, really, I suspect that whoever takes up the mantle if Boris Johnson does leave, well, they're going to be exactly the same. They're not going to come out with some incredible manifesto, pledging to help the economy, kickstart into overdrive or anything like that. They're not going to turn it into a socialist hellhole either. It's going to remain pretty much exactly as it is right now. For the rest of the world, well, again, there might be a tiny bit of volatility, but the reality is the British economy just isn't really that influential anymore. Yes, it's still the 6th largest in the world, but in terms of financial markets, well, the vast majority of people watching this video, you're American, and you probably don't invest in British stocks at all, so this just likely isn't going to impact you much. That is pretty much it for the day. I am on the final day of my holiday. I'll be back to work full time tomorrow, back in my usual place in my studio with the usual setup, my usual audio. Hopefully this video was okay. Hopefully the audio was okay as well. Hopefully you've all had a good weekend. If you're British, hopefully it was a good 4-day weekend. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, comment and subscribe to bless the YouTube algorithm. It really does help. If you want to join our exclusive community, then check out our Patreon. You get access to our Discord server and extra content like access to my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. Also, make sure to check out the link in the description to Masterworks. They can help you protect your portfolio against market turmoil through fractional shares of art from world famous artists. Art has historically proven to be uncorrelated to the markets, so it's a really valuable resource with the markets falling every week. There's also a link in the description to I Trust Capital, a site that allows you to invest in crypto through your tax-advantaged IRA, which could literally save you thousands. If you think that crypto going down is a buy-in opportunity, then now is the perfect time to join I Trust Capital. Thank you all for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.